Hello, and welcome. I am Web Weaver, and I'm so glad that you have found my channel here today. This is the first video in a series where we'll be discussing the Wheel of the Year, which is recognized and celebrated by many witches and pagans throughout the world. It's intended to be an introduction for anyone who's new to the path of paganism or witchcraft, or for anyone who's just wanting to learn more. Maybe you heard a friend mention the Wheel of the Year, or you saw it on a social media post. So this is meant for you. If you've been on the path a while, this probably is going to be old news. So this video will be an overview of the wheel, while the rest of the videos in the series will focus on each part of the wheel individually. So before we begin, two notes. First, I am outside because it is where I can get some quiet privacy for a short amount of time. So if you hear noises, birds, breeze, fine. I can't guarantee there won't be some, neighborhood noises of somebody working on something, but we're going to get this in. The second thing to remember, there is no set dogma for pagans, including witches. So this means that the way that my family practices and I practice is going to be different than the way another pagan or witch family practices. And that's totally okay. The diversity is beautiful and we learn from each other. But that being said, the information that I am providing for you today is based on the training that I have received and the experiences I have had. So if you're still searching for a path for yourself, I highly encourage you to explore the works of various practitioners. Find the path that best fits your beliefs and lifestyle. So I will provide a list of books that I have read in the video description. So if you are still looking, you're still searching, you can look at that list, and if there's something on there you haven't read before, maybe pick it up at your local library and see what it has to say. But I highly encourage that. All right, so now that we have the basics out of the way, we are going to start looking at the Wheel of the Year. Now, when I say Wheel of the Year, we are referring to the 8 seasons that are celebrated throughout the year. Now, I did bring a prop to help with this. So if we look at this diagram, okay, you can see that there are 8 seasons. We are looking at this circle right here. Okay. The ones that are located north, south, east, and west at the cardinal points are the solstices and the equinoxes. The ones that are located on the X, right here, those are cross quarter days. Now, the astrological date of each season, the start of it varies a little bit because of astrology, the movements of the planets and where they are in relation to Earth, and it's not set in stone. It varies. However, there are calendar dates that are put in place, have been chosen as the start date for the season, and they don't change every year. Now, when a pagan or a pagan family or a witch family, whatever you want to call it, celebrates the start of each season is up to them. If they want to follow astrological dates, then they follow astrological dates. If they want to follow calendar dates, then they celebrate on the calendar date. If they are practicing, when we practiced in a group, we went for the weekend after the start date because that's when everybody could get there. So it really just, it's a very individual decision. In my training, I was taught to follow the astrological dates because it is attuned to nature, whereas the calendar is a man-made system of measuring time. However, these are seasons, not just days. So as long as the energies of the season are honored, the exact date that you celebrate is not quite as important. So each celebration is called a Sabbath. It has themes and common activities that tie into the season and its meaning. And because the wheel has no beginning and no end, everything just continues in this beautiful cycle. The seasons also correspond to the human life cycle, which I'll explain as we go through each of the seasons. One last detail to know is that there is a light half of the year and a dark half of the year. The light half of the year is when there's more daylight than darkness each day. The dark half of the year is when there is more darkness than daylight each day. While there are many other layers of meaning that can be applied to each season and to the wheel itself, I'm only going to be covering the basic information in this video. So I do have notes to look at to make sure that I hit on everything so that I don't forget something. So if you hear paper rustling, that's what it is. So let's go ahead and get started. We're going to start with Samhain. So Samhain is considered by many to be the witch's new year. It's where one year ends and the new one begins. It's commonly celebrated on Halloween, but astrologically it occurs when the sun reaches 15 degrees Scorpio, which is usually around November 6th or 7th. This is a time of rest, of reflection, of honoring the ancestors. In the human life cycle, Samhain corresponds to the death and the soul crossing the afterlife, crossing into the afterlife. So, death is not something that is commonly talked about regularly in modern society. A lot of people tend to avoid it, but not in paganism. It's simply a part of the life cycle, and it's not something that is to be feared. It is just the next step in the turning. So, as we move around the wheel, we come to Yule. Yule is also known as winter solstice, and it is celebrated when the sun enters Capricorn, which is always between December 20th and 22nd. So while this is officially the start of winter, many pagans refer to this as midwinter because we are halfway through the dark half of the year. At Yule, pagans celebrate the rebirth of the sun, S-U-N. So winter solstice is the longest night and the shortest day, meaning each day after will have a little more light. Yule is just one of many festivals of light that are held during this time of the year because many cultures recognize the returning sun and the importance that that held in agrarian society. If we look at the human life cycle, Yule is the moment of birth. This is the moment when the baby emerges from the darkness of the womb into the light of the world. So if we continue around the circle, let me find my notes here, we come to Imbolc. Imbolc is commonly celebrated on Groundhog Day, Candlemas, St. Bridget's Day. They all happen at the same time, around the same time. But astrologically, it occurs when the sun reaches 15 degrees Aquarius, which is usually around February 1st or 2nd, which is when those days fall. Imbolc is the midpoint between winter solstice and spring equinox. Imbolc is a time for celebrating the growing light and the coming spring. When I think of Imbolc, I always have an image in my head of this little purple crocus emerging from the snow. So the world is just starting to wake up. In our practice, we've always dedicated ourselves to our plans for the year at Imbolc. So we would make a dedication candle. We decide what it is we're working on this year, whether it be a personal dedication or a communal dedication. But that is when we would make that dedication. In the human life cycle, Imbolc corresponds to childhood. This is when we are nurtured and growing and discovering the world. I have a young child, so very much in her Imbolc period. So if we spin the wheel again, we end up at Ostara. This is also known as spring equinox. And Ostara is celebrated when the sun enters Aries, which always falls between March 19th or 21st. This is the official start of spring when light and dark are balanced. This is when we enter into the light half of the year. This is a time when we celebrate fertility, the rebirth of nature, very much corresponds to Easter and the themes of Easter with coloring eggs and bunnies and all of that. Ostara corresponds to the teenage years. So when human beings are starting to find out what they enjoy, begin to visualize what they want out of life. As we continue on, we have Beltane. So Beltane is celebrated when the sun reaches 15 degrees Taurus, which is always between April 30th to May 7th. The most common calendar day for the celebration of Beltane is May 1st, also known as May Day. Beltane is the halfway point between spring equinox and summer solstice, and it celebrates the fertility of the world. Many pagans view it as the marriage of the goddess and the god, so that would be held in May, and then the weddings of people would be held in June, which is why the old wives' tales are that June is the month of weddings. So Beltane corresponds to early adulthood, when people are celebrating and enjoying life with their friends, they're finding partners, they're landing their dream job, they're living in the moment. And then we go on to Letha. So Letha is also known as the summer solstice or midsummer. Astrologically, this is when the sun enters Cancer, falling between June 20th and 22nd. This is the midpoint between the light and dark halves of the year. Being the opposite point on the wheel from Yule, Letha is the longest day and the shortest night, and it celebrates the abundance and growth and the full power of the sun. And Letha corresponds to later adulthood, getting ready to enter into middle age, when we are celebrating our achievements, our career, our family, maybe goals you've achieved. Maybe, I don't know, maybe you've gone and hiked the Appalachian Trail. I don't know. Whatever it is, you feel powerful like the sun. And then we move into Lammas or Lunasa. So Lammas is celebrated when the sun reaches 15 degrees Leo, usually around August 7th or 8th. Although the common calendar date for the celebration is August 1st. This is the midpoint between summer solstice and fall equinox or autumnal equinox. It's the first of 3 harvest festivals. The first harvest festival is this one, and it focuses on the grain. Lammas means loaf mass, whereas Lunasa refers to the Celtic god Lugh. So in the human life cycle, Lammas corresponds to elder adults who are nearing or starting their retirement and beginning to look back on their lives. What are they finally harvesting in this life cycle? Their first harvest is coming in. Then we come to Mabon on the wheel of the year. This is also known as autumnal equinox or fall equinox. Mabon is when the sun enters Libra, always falling between September 21st through 24th. Once again, light and dark are balanced, but this time we're moving into the dark half of the year. This is the second of the 3 harvest festivals. This one has a focus on fruits and vegetables. And this Sabbath, when you think about the themes and the decor and the food and the celebration that you're holding, it's very much like American Thanksgiving. So in regards to the human life cycle, Mabon corresponds to the final years of our lives, where we're reflecting on our accomplishments, we're making preparations for the end of this life before we move back into Samhain. So Samhain is where we started. It's that 3rd harvest festival, and this is the harvesting of the meat for the winter. We honor those who have passed, and we recognize that death is but the next step. So in agrarian society, this is where people would look at the livestock that they had, decide which ones were fit enough to keep for the following year, and the ones that weren't were then butchered and harvested, and the meat was preserved in order to help the family survive the winter. So death was an integral part of this time period. Many pagans believe in reincarnation and that we live many lives. Now, the details of those beliefs, again, this is very individualized. It's going to vary from person to person. But in this way, the idea that at Samhain we die, at the Samhain time of our lives, we experience death and we cross back into the spirit realm across the veil. At some point, we will return at the Yule of our lives to begin again in a new life as a new person. Our souls then mirror the cycles of nature. So that is it for the wheel. Those are the 8 celebrations in a nutshell. There is so much more I could tell you, and I will be sharing a lot more detail in the videos that follow. But I hope you've enjoyed this brief summary of the wheel. Um, if you are more interested, I will be posting those videos in short order when I get a chance to get them finished. Um, but they will take a deeper dive into each of the Sabbats that are celebrated and that were mentioned in this video. If you want to follow along and learn more, if you want to know when I post those videos, or if you're interested in the daily 1 card tarot readings that I post, make sure you subscribe just to be able to be notified of the new content. I hope you have a wonderful day and that you've enjoyed the video. Blessed be.